Andres.
Hey, Claudio, good afternoon. Doing fine. Friday afternoon, you know.
Guess what? The one I can't hear you now.
You can't hear me now. So
Let
now
me see
the
what's going
promise is
on. I cannot hear you, so it seems like we're having some. Oh
technical
no, no. Okay, all
difficulties.
right. It came back.
Yeah,
It came back. So
it came
great.
back.
All right. So how about now, guys? ah, it. Thank God it's Friday because right.
Yeah, yeah. And this is life. People understand that the life shows these type of things usually happens
Right.
because there are many things. There are many things. I mean, to make this possible, you know that you need many pieces working together in order to make it work, and any one of them can break at any time. So, being a live show, be with us, and thank you.
All right. Let's see. Let's see how is my volume now, Elvis.
It's saying the volume is low,
Okay. So
especially yours.
yeah, and typically, while we have a live audience, the there might be a lag right in between when we say something between when they hear. So, all
Yeah.
right. So let's assume that sound is working fine, and let's introduce the Xamarin Best Practices October Challenge. And so,
October in November.
yeah, so that is a really good point because it already happened, right? So some folks were aware because I started this all the way back in August. Initially, it was going to be a September challenge, but then obviously, schedule happens and one gets busy, and so we moved it to happening in October. And the premise of it, and let me switch over to the screen where we're seeing the GitHub repo for it. Um, so the idea of the challenge was pretty straightforward, right? So I made a blog post and back in August where I was saying that I wanted to do a Xamarin challenge, but not focus on UI. And I know that lately Medium has having has made some changes now that if you're an avid reader in Medium, they might start charging you, and so it's kind of a paywall now. But anyways, back in August, I had written an article and described a challenge that I wanted to focus on a best practices challenge as opposed to UI. There has been some really great challenges in the past year, but kind of focus just on Xamarin UI. And this time around, because as you know, Andres, right? When we write an app, there's all kinds of different things, not just the
Yeah.
UI. So
Yeah, I say especially that we all know that as a developers that we have creative work in many applications in different sizes. We know that the UI is nice. We all love a beautiful UIs, but at the end of the day, you need an app with good performance, and that you will get it usually most of the time with using best practices.
correct. And so the point of the challenge was to document all the things, and how it worked was that if you want to write something and contribute to it, we created a table of content, and all of that is in a GitHub repo publicly available. So I created a table of content of different topics and suggested that if you had something that you wanted to write about and it wasn't in the table of content, that you can also submit a pull request and add the subject that you wanted to the table of content, and subsequently then submit a pull request. And I must have been foreseeing this whole Medium thing. So the idea was that you could take some content. Let's say if you wrote a blog post about the best way to do authentication, you could take that content, put it in a pull request in an MD file format, and then commit it to the repo, and link back to the original article, so that way the content could be inside of the repo. So if say you wanted to read it, Andres, you could clone the repo and have everything locally, and that way you have all the content there, right? So the idea is to continue contributing to this knowledge base of best practices for Xamarin in a way that the content is in the GitHub repo. And some people did follow that advice. Some people, chose. Some people chose to put it on their blog post and then link to the blog post. That's fine as well. I mean, we're all learning here, and this is all about contributing, not necessarily how you contribute. And as an example here, we use the advent calendar kind of thing where you would pick a date and then your article would be published on that date. But what happened is really people made contributions, and we ended up kind of scrapping the whole let's do one blog post a day, and instead we decided to do this at the end or at the beginning of the next month, which is today, right?
Exactly.
So all right, without further ado, then let's go over to the README file of the actual repo, and let's look at the table of content, right? So again, this is just a table of content we put together. I think you made some contributions, Andres, to this table of content, and there is UI. So while we didn't want this to be all about UI, there's obviously some room there for documenting best practices in terms of UI. And here is some of the topics, and where people have added most of the content revolves around continuous delivery, and topics like feature flags, authentication, crash reporting, and testing as well. And so
yes, because we all know that testing is important.
So I'm going to go down to the actual calendar and look at all the different contributions, Andres, that we got submitted. We didn't fill all the spots, and that's okay. That's okay. We know that kind of sometimes right now UI is very popular in the Xamarin ecosystem, but we have some really good contributions. So what do you think about this, Andres?
Oh yeah, I read it. It was really good. It's very important too, because we all know that at the end of the day, you can have the best app, but if you don't know how to sign it, how to ship it to the stores. So there are best practices about how to shrink your app for Android, how to save your keys for iOS, and those type of things. James Montemagno was talking in the entry that he made on the day number 4.
Right. So let's get started and show some of these articles that we have. Let's see, to transition over to the screen. All right. So we're going to start with this article: to keep your Xamarin apps up to date using Signal R. Very, very interesting article. And so for the uninitiated, can you tell the folks on the stream what is Signal R?
Oh yeah, sure. So Signal R is so if you want to do live communications between your mobile application and a server, you will require Signal R. It just simplify. It is a socket-based communication, so your app would be listening to the requests and the responses that are coming from Signal R basically, and working with sockets. If you have never done it, you know that there are many considerations that you got to take into account for working with sockets.
Right. So it's like basically the go-to.NET implementation if you want to do WebSockets, but you don't want to deal with all the complexity.
That's right. That's correct.
That's pretty cool. And by the way, it's totally open source, and it was initially written by a member of the ASP.NET Core team, David Fowler, and then he's like, oh, this sounds like a pretty good thing to integrate into or make part of ASP.NET Core, and now it is, right. So it's something that ships, right, with ASP.NET Core.
And to talk a little bit more about Signal R is that the community behind Signal R is very active, as it is the community behind Xamarin. So if you're a Xamarin developer and you wanna learn more about Signal R, David Fowler in Twitter, he's always tweeting, posting stuff, the new stuff that he in the community is doing with this technology. So I suggest you to follow him if you don't, and you will learn a lot,
There you
definitely.
go. There you go. So definitely follow David Fowler. And so, what I missed to say that this who is this article by? Bear with me. Um, so let's see. Let's see. Well, I'll find it later. Alrighty. So we're going through this implementation. It explains how you set up a server for the purpose of a fictitious chat application. And it talks about how do you do CRUD, and in a way in which it's updated real time. And the article talks about how to set up a Signal R server, and then how to set up your mobile client. And here is even a screen grab that is showing you the application logging in, and then you're kind of in a chat room type setting. And this is all using Signal R as the backend
And
for
.NET.
and
Yeah.
.NET.
So it's all .NET. Basically, you have Xamarin on one end, which is a C#, and you have Signal R running in the other end. And so at the end, you're running your whole solution using the beautiful language of C#.
Right. So this article, the next contribution is actually in video format, and it was done by James Montemagno and Abel Wang from. They have a show called DevOps for Mobile. So this is part of the Microsoft Channel 9, right? And Channel 9, they produce, which is the Microsoft TV station. They produce a lot of different content, and this is sort of a series of episodes for .NET developers, specifically doing DevOps for mobile. And the video is amazing. It's about 25 minutes, and they talk about how to do signing and versioning of iOS and Android apps utilizing App Center and Azure DevOps. So great video rather. Really good contribution in video format. So there you go. It doesn't even have to be an article. It could be a video. Let's see. Then we have Release Made Easy with App Center by Raul Montero, who is right now. I think he is online watching us as we are showing
As we speak.
as we speak. So let's go take a look at Raul's contribution. So this is going to be focused on just releases with App Center, because we know that App Center is able to do all kinds of things, yes? And so their tutorial here explains how you go from zero from adding an application, in this case 2 applications, right? If your app is done with Xamarin and you have both an iOS and an Android client. And Raul describes here how to start with the default build, which is pretty easy. Andres, if you start an app, even by yourself, the first thing I would suggest you do after you do that file new, Xamarin Forms, and then push to your repo is come over here to App Center and set up an automatic build, because it takes no time to do it.
And it will remove a lot of time from your building process. Definitely. I do suggest you as well. Every time I do an app, it doesn't matter if I'm doing a testing application, I just go to App Center, I link my GitHub repository, and I make my app to build. At least building and distributing my apps is something that I don't want to be doing by hand.
Right, because it will even catch, if the problem it runs on my machine, it will even catch things like that. So you might do something and it runs fine, but then you push it to your master, your trunk branch, and it doesn't build because you forgot about some little thing that you had on your computer. So this, even just for that, is great initially. And then obviously, you can test on real devices and do all kinds of things. But so Raul describes here in very detail all the different steps you have to take to go from file new project to now having a build working to having Android and also iOS releases. So pretty cool. And you can start shipping your app to your testers and other folks that may be interested in getting the early bits of your application by following this tutorial. Thank you, Raul.
Yeah, that was a very good topic, and so we see this one and the next one, the three being focused on App Center and distribution, and how to automate many of the things that we do manually on the apps. We see that that's where you get really good performance, really good uh, things that you can add to your workflow, to the development workflow. What I want to say is that we see Raul showing us how to set up App Center for our apps, and we see how Jason DeMagno made a video about the best practices for signing and versioning the iOS and Android applications using App Center. And the next one is going to be Emmanuel Toribio, which is he's going to be showing us how to crash
Right.
gracefully, yeah, using App Center as well. So
And then the eloquent words of Thor in Thor Ragnarok. I know this guy. He's a friend from work. So there we go. Crashing like a pro with App Center. So we continue the saga of talking about App Center. In this case, where Toribio is talking about crash, right? So unfortunately, we all commit code that is not perfect, right? And at some point, your application is going to start crashing. And how amazing it is to go back to that place where you just set up a build and distribution, and now integrate the whole shebang, right? Crash diagnostics and crash and errors, which are two different things, right? Crash is when your application just magically boom blows up and disappears, closes down, and you're back to the main screen of the phone. Whereas an error is something, an exception that may occur within your project, and you're able to catch, and you're able to report that error, even though you're able to handle it gracefully and your application doesn't crash. And so Emmanuel guides you through how to set this up, and also he even shows you from the perspective of a real application what that looks like whenever you start having problems. And look at this stuff. It even gives you the stack trace. It tells you where the device is at, what kind of device it is. So you know, Andres, like especially when you're dealing with Android devices, how difficult it is to isolate a problem, because you don't know what device the user has, and it may run on 20 different versions, but maybe not that one particular version that user has. You and I have done a lot of Android dev, so we know the pains. It runs fine on my development phone.
Yeah, especially since that there's a problem that we probably run many times is that I usually have one high-end device to test my applications, or close to high-end. I don't have the latest one, but at least I try to have something close to the latest one. But the problem is when your application is cheap to other devices with older version of Android, and you don't have control over that, because I don't have an Android 5 in my drawer to test it.
You don't have like you don't have a drawer with like 20 different devices just laying around?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore. I used to have many devices before, but I say now I just rely on App Center and UI test to test my applications.
Wow. Okay. Nice. So there we go. And that's the article on how to deal with crashes and error reporting on App Center. So the next contribution is it's actually part of the Microsoft Docs, right? So that's start analyzing your mobile application with App Center and with application insights, which it is sort of using two different Microsoft products. So App Center is the product where the application, your mobile application, sends telemetry to. So crash reporting, events, and other important data. But then there's another product by Microsoft within the Azure ecosystem called Azure App Insights. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to have more powerful tools where you're able to now get data from the backend, from if there is a web client, from the web client, from your mobile application, um, all in one place. And so this
Yeah.
article guides you in how to connect App Center to Azure App Insights, and then be able to analyze that data. So it shows you how to track an event. So if you have something in your application, let's say you have a shopping cart application and you want to track when a user checks out, then you are able to track that event and have metadata attached to that event. And so that
The
data
same.
then funnels into App Insights. Yeah, you were saying, Andres?
Yeah, and I'm sorry to I was gonna interrupt you. So the same happens when you wanna track because it's so check talking about the shopping cart that you just mentioned. That's, let's say, the happy path that when everything works correctly. But there are other things that you might want to track. For example, you might have some errors in your applications crashing, and you don't know what was the how to make it happen. So if you use your application inside, you can see what the user was doing before the crashing. So
Right. You can leave like little
you can
breadcrumbs,
simply,
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And so, the user logged on, the user entered that screen, the user
Exact.
selected this product and then tried to add it to the cart, and boom, it crashed, right? Or
And
it,
then it crashed. Exactly. Yeah. So you can see what was the path that the user was following before the crash. That will help the developers to follow the same path and try to reproduce it and fix it.
and so I gotta tell you, I used, this is one of the things that I use a lot in different applications that I'm working on. And just the other day, I was working with the analytics team for this customer that we have, where they needed to provide some reporting to management, and there were things like how many users in the last few days have done this particular set of activities, and that's something that you can't really get very easily from App Center. But what we
Yep.
did was, because we had the data coming into App Insights, is we were able to use a Custo query to go into the analytics. And Custo is a query language that allows you to query these data sources that are in App Insights in a way that looks like SQL, but it's not SQL. And but it's really powerful. You can even generate graphs from a query. So all you have to do is write a query, and it shows you the data, and then you select the chart button, click on the chart button, and it shows you a chart of the data you just queried.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. So it's very powerful in what you can do. You can build entire dashboards with this functionality based on information that comes from your application. And so have to include things like how many users, information about sessions, events. You can create funnels. If any, if you recall from web applications, let's say if you're using Google Analytics, you can create funnels where it tells you the user first enters this screen and then they navigate to this path of your application. It can give you information about retention, what users are using your application, how they're using it, and all kinds of really cool information. So it's very powerful. Awesome. Another great contribution. Let's go back
Good
to the tool
contribution, and
phone.
thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Microsoft Docs team.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the repo. And the next contribution is by
Yes,
the one and
Montemagno
only
again.
James Montemagno.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Xamarin Forms. How about you talk to us about this one, Andres? I know you like this one a lot.
Yeah, because we all know how hard it is to have data for design, and you can go through the screen. I'm moving also on this side. So basically, this pause is more about how can we have data to show when we are in design mode. We know that we when we're working with collections, we're working with some screens that are created based on data that comes from from another source, let's say an API or either from the database. We might not have that information when we are designing our applications. So we need to find ways to mock the data. Sometimes we comes to putting mock data to the entities, but then we need to be delivering in this blog post. Yes, Montemagno is showing us how we can efficiently mock the data without dying
Right, and
trying.
especially if
Eh,
those backend developers are slow in developing the API, you can't
Oh yeah, yeah,
always
they're usually
assume
slow.
that they're going to have the API ready for you because you're using Xamarin, so you're going pretty fast, and that's another reason why you want to mock
Yeah,
data and be able to develop your screens. And how cool you can also leverage hot reload for that, and so you're able to. But I mean, there are other scenarios. Like let's say that for whatever reason you're working while disconnected, right? So you can't. It takes time for you to run the mobile application and for it to call some backend, and if it has data, then bring it back, and you're changing the screen and you're rebuilding. So that workflow sometimes is very slow if you're depending on real data. And so having design time data, it's great because you can have the designer open, you can have hot reload, and it's much quicker, right? So that's
yeah,
yeah
yeah,
another reason
yeah,
to be able to
yeah.
do this.
It would be quicker using the data that you have locally. Then you don't have to be calling an endpoint, even though the endpoint is already responding.
Alrighty, so amazing. Let's move on to the next contribution. And so we have another contribution is getting started with Microsoft App Center by Trevor Tyrell. I hope I pronounced the last name correctly here. Newcomer to the Microsoft slash Xamarin ecosystem. It's a great contribution. Let's see. This is even how, if you don't even have App Center, right? How do you get started?
How do you create your accounts?
How do you create your account, and what are the things that you can do in it? And by the way, App Center is not something that you can only use with Xamarin. You can use it with native applications developed in React Native, Cordova, Unity, Objective-C in the case of, for instance, iOS. And so
Yeah.
anything that it's a mobile application, regardless of the toolchain, you can actually use App Center with.
Yeah, I still use it from time to time to Swift projects that I do for testing, and it's very reliable.
There we go. So
S-
you get to the point where you have an application, and then ta-da, it starts, when you integrate the SDK and a few lines of code, it starts sending data up to App Center. So thank you for the contribution. All right, best practices for automated UI testing. This is a topic that it's sometimes not discussed at length. Like, we've seen the articles about how do you get started with UI testing, and those are great, but how cool is it? And this one comes from Swiki. She's from the Microsoft Xamarin team. And here you go. It is on channel 9, and she goes through a very detailed approach in how to create UI user interface automation tests that are not brittle. And so she talks about best practices, design patterns that you can utilize, and I think they even have this implemented in a open source project called the Tailwind Traders, which is sort of one of the sample applications that the Microsoft teams put together to showcase some of this functionality. So I
Yeah,
definitely love
and
this.
yeah, and let me tell you, Claudio, this one is one of my favorites. At work, I was having some issues with UI testing, and especially it's more it was more because we know that we need to do UI tests, but there's as you said, there's a lot of documentation, but sometimes it's not the right documentation, and this one is just perfect because it tells you the best practices, what you how you can get the most out of the UI test, how you can avoid duplicating stuff in your UI testing, how you can make it quite easier. And with this one, I was even able to fix some of the issues that I had when I was working and at work in the UI test. So yeah, this one was really really good, and thank you, Swiki, for the video. I'm a video person. I love watching videos and listening to podcasts. Reading is nice, but the videos are more
And they
important.
have
For me,
all they
for me,
have all
videos
the
are
links
better.
down here too for those that like video and also reading, and they want to
Reading, yeah.
have the information in a written format to share with others. So they have all of that. It's in the description of the video. Okay, let's close some windows over here. Just keep going. And the next contribution, which we talked about at the beginning, it is the contribution by Mark Alibone on using Signal R.
Signal.
So here it is. We talked about how to set up the server, how to set it up from the server from the back end perspective, then the mobile client, and he does a small demo here on how to send information back and forth, right? And so let's go back over here. Another great contribution into the Apple Store publication via App Center, and that's by Abel Wang from the. It's part of the DevOps for mobile.
About it is Android's actually really
video.
easy. Of course, that's an ongoing theme that you might be
what is
seeing
it?
here. Right.
Category,
I can just
if you would,
email
right?
you this APK and you can
Yep.
open.
And this is
open it, as
James
long as you say it's
Montemagno
trusted,
and
it will
Abel
install on your
talking about
device.
how to do
Now,
that. So it's a series of about
Android operating
5
system
videos.
really
I would
gives
suggest
you
go
the
check it
control.
out and watch
Apple,
all 5 of them.
Not so much.
All 5 episodes.
They control it.
Because it's
And
very,
additionally, serving
very
those files is also
informative
very tricky.
and allows you to
so
learn, if you
normally
didn't
would
already
think
know
like,
it,
I could
how to
give them
leverage
a
all the
URL where they could
functionality
download on their
that
Apple device and install it.
both
Do
App
that on
Center and
iOS. You can
Azure
do it yourself,
DevOps
but you have web
have
service
in terms of
config
mobile.
files and authority files.
And
what App
and let me
Center
take the
has done is they
opportunity,
say, hey,
Claudio,
give
to
us your
remind
app.
the
We
folks
will
that
allow
are
you to create
listening right now
groups, distribution
that
groups.
all the content that is in Shout and I is free. So all the videos that we're posting here are free, but you can browse, and there are many other contents that you can definitely learn from.
Correct. All this content is it's free. It's not behind any paywalls, except for the Medium articles if you happen to read a lot. And then Trevor again, right, made another contribution about authentication using App Center, which is one of the newest features that App Center has. So behind the scenes, it's using Azure Active Directory B2C to be able to do that. So there's a little bit of setting up, and the article guides you through how do you set up. Sorry. Oh. What it's called an Azure B2C tenant, and what are the steps you have to take to be able to do that. In essence, it's a way to have user authentication without having to roll your own, right? Without having to set up a database with users and passwords, because we know what happens.
And roles, right? Yeah, we all know.
And all of that stuff that you don't want to have to roll your own, and then your application gets big and you find out that you have a data leak.
Or even worse, that your application had hacked and your database, the user is compromised, and their user information is there in the dark web with password and stuff. So using this, you don't have to be thinking the security on the user side for your application. Of course, you will need to make your app secure anyways, but there is some responsibility that is taken off your shoulders.
There you go. So the article is very detailed, and it guides you step by step on how to do it. And then you end up having an ability to do authentication for your application by utilizing the Azure B2C, Azure Active Directory B2C, and App Center. It tells you what you need to add to your manifest file, and also to your info plist in the case of iOS, and then how to initialize that. There we go.
Yep.
And here is your application with an ability to log in. Ta-da! All right, the next contribution is going to be by Miguel Angel Martín Hernández, and I believe he's from Spain. And here we're talking about unit testing, the way I test my view models, right? And so he describes here his approach to how he implements unit testing. And nice, an MBA fan. He uses an MBA example. So an application, and he's talking about testing the business logic for the login screen and the tooling he's using. So he's using XUnit, Fluent Assertions, and MOQ. And now we go into detail as to the use cases that he's putting together with this library. And there you go. Now you're able to execute tests, write tests for your view models, which should encapsulate your business logic.
Yeah, because there's this huge discussion in many communities why you need a view model. And for me, view model means this, that you can test your business logic without relying on UI.
Just put it all in the code behind, right? Just put it all in the code behind.
Yeah. We have UI testing, is true, but the UI for me means more like integration, means that you would test the whole application, where in your view models you can test a specific part of your business logic in one page.
I think Damian Edwards from the ASP.NET Core team would say, friends don't let other friends put business logic in the code behind, right?
Exactly.
Right. So the original quote is, "Friends don't let friends right click publish," but I think it's very appropriate here, also for view models. Then the next contribution, last but not least, is this guy here. You know him, Claudio Sanchez.
I used to know him. I used to know him. He's a nice guy.
Sometimes. So this article talks about how to do feature flags in your mobile application. And for those who are not very familiar with feature flags, is basically an ability to turn things on and off without having to recompile your application. And they are very useful because they allow you to roll things out. Let's say you have some feature that you probably haven't tested, and you just want to release it out to the wild and maybe enable it for some users. But if it fails or start having problems, you want to be able to turn it off. So, ta-da, feature flags to the rescue. That's how you do that. And the article talks in detail what's the value of having feature flags, and takes a fictitious mobile application. And so it shows you here that I have a little widget that our team is working with, and they want to put it out there because they think it's valuable, but they are concerned that it might not be ready. And so we implement it with feature flags, so that way we're able to turn it on and off based on the confidence that the team is getting while the feature is out in the wild. And for this article, we utilize a product called Launch Darkly, which is a feature flag as a service, but the concepts apply to other things. So for instance, Azure rolled out this product, which is not in general availability yet. It's called Azure App Configuration, and it allows you to have feature flags and also configuration settings as a service. And so it goes through the process of how you do it. It's pretty simple. Setting up one of these backends takes nothing but like a few minutes. And now you have your feature working, and now you integrate it inside of your mobile application. You initialize it with a key, start it up, and then you say, hey, is this feature on or off, a good place to do that will be on appearing on your view model. And then if you can execute, for instance, if the feature is on, can see spending analysis, then we show the feature. Right? This is just bound to the visibility of that feature.
So basically, this will allow us mobile developers to ship features that can later be on and off from the server.
That is correct. So you can.
Oh, so that's nice.
So imagine, right, that you're a bank and we roll out this feature, but then at some point, a Saturday afternoon, the feature is not working as it's supposed to. Can you imagine getting called to just having to jump on your computer?
That would be awful.
Put a big if
be
statement somewhere, and then having to ship another version through the App Store, wait for it to get approved, and then hit the button to publish. Right? That would be disaster.
Yeah, and well, you say Saturday afternoon, but there's another rule: is that friends don't let friends make a release on Friday afternoon. So
that's right.
That way, that way you won't have any issues on Saturdays or Sundays.
That's a really good rule. Friends don't let friends do a deployment to production on Fridays. Okay, so.
Claudio, we have another one. Just wanted to let you know that we are live, and this is the beauty of open source. There was another post that was pending the approval, and I just did. So if you go to the homepage and you refresh, you will see that for the number 24, we have a new entry.
Okay, got you. See,
right.
Live television. You went and updated the list.
I made it in production. I hope it's working.
And where should I see that?
You should refresh your website. You should refresh. Number 24.
Here it is. Number 24. Okay.
Yeah.
Analytics best practices. Okay. So setting up the context for this one. So let's say that you've already set up your app center for analytics, right? And you've initialized the SDK and everything. So this article talks about, bear with me, article by Samir Mansoor, talks about what are the things that you should care about, right? So what are the best practices in terms of analytics? And he describes, what kind of data, what are things that are important, and he shows you just that out of the box analytics are good, but you should definitely think about what you're going to track, so that way you can get more out of the data, right? And so he's showing you what it looks like when you go to the Apple iTunes Connect, which is for iOS, and then to the Google Play console for Android. Then he talks about, what are the things you should log.
Best practices for logging. Let's say that he's showing a very nice way. You know that when you want to track your page, every time that user visit the page, you usually see the page name. But the problem is that sometimes if you use a stream, that page might change later, but the stream might keep the same. So you can use the class, and he shows how we can use the class name of the file to get the page name and to use it to fill our analytics.
Good.
Really good.
So he talks about things that you want to log, like terrible performance. If you have an API that's being very poor in terms of performance, you want to log that. Talks about bad performance, so it's bad, but not terribly slow. You still want to log it, and if you get errors, you want to log that as well. And also, let's see, he talks about which Xamarin Analytics package should I choose. He talks about the different packages that may be available for you to be able to do that. And cool. Yeah, so definitely, best practices for both platforms. and how to accomplish this. All right, so I should say that is the last contribution we have on the dockets, but I would say that this is not going to end in October, right? So it didn't end. So what we're going to do is we're going to be changing the calendar to just a list of contributions, so that way we can continue this, because the truth of the matter is that best practices, there's so many best practices that go into that you have to take into consideration when writing a mobile application. And we may have best practices today that may not be best practices in 6 months. So the purpose of this was to really get people excited about it and get them contributing, but then also to keep this as a reference that even ourselves we're going to continue using right, for years to come. Whenever now I have a question about what are the best practices for analytics, now I have a place to direct people to, for them to be able to know how to do that, or to learn how to do that. And if they then figure out some best practices themselves, they can contribute that to this list. What do you think, Andres? You're pretty big on open source, so what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you know that I'm always advocate to working in communities, and this type of event, this type of challenges, what make people work in assist, as I was saying, working in a community manner. And yes, there are gonna be many other contributions that might come later. Just watching at the videos and watching at the great contribution that the other folks had made, one came to my mind, and it's like, what would be the best practices for working with resources in Xamarin Form? We know that we have different ways to work with resources. When I talk about resources, I say about the dictionary, the resources that you put the styles, that you put where you create the styling, where you create the fonts, where you define what is going to be the resources of your application, and what will be in that case the best practices for it. Probably that's something that you can talk about later, Claudio, or I might talk about later if you allow me. I could do an entry in the
Sure. I mean, the cool thing is open source, right? The cool thing is open source, and you're a contributor to the repo. So I would invite definitely more people if you want to contribute to the repository, and if you want to even be part of the group of people that are moderators, please let me know. I'll add you to the list of moderators, because the one cool thing about this is that I don't have to be in the critical path of it. So go to town if you want to add more stuff to it. I will definitely continue to add more stuff to it, and I will also evangelize and tell people about it so that they can contribute. The goal for me with this is we'll see what happens from now all the way to next October. And so the idea is here to, in October 2020, at Caribbean Developers Conference, shameless plug here, right? This is a conference that I'm part of the organizing team, and it just happened this last October in Punta Cana, and it's going to happen again the next October 2020 in Punta Cana. And so the idea there at that point is you and I will be doing streaming, right, or recording an episode and talking about what people have contributed, what are the kind of giving you an update on what has been contributed to.
For me sounds amazing, especially if we're going to be doing the recording from the Caribbean, probably having a margarita or having some nice drink. I'm into it.
Well, there you go. And tickets are for sale now, so I would say, if you want to talk about Xamarin Best Practices, and call for papers are going to happen in the next couple of weeks. So if you feel so strongly about best practices for Xamarin, I would suggest also submit a talk to the conference. Well, Andres,
it'd be great it'd be great following with the same direction that you were talking about. It'd be great having some of these topics that we talk being part of that conference. So probably it could be a summary of all of it, like best practices in overall, for me, I believe it could be an excellent talk.
There you go.
So
So
if you're listening to this and you want to talk about it, sign for the paper.
Andres, we're gonna get like 20 submissions for talks about Xamarin Best Practices for CDC 2020. Well, folks, thank you very much, Andres. Thank you for joining me on this crazy live streaming. I know I told you about this a few days ago, but then we connected today to get this done. So thank you very much for taking time and doing this with me.
It's a pleasure, Claudio. It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
So everyone that is still on the channel listening to this, thank you very much for participating. Please, like all YouTubers do and say, please subscribe to the channel and hit, before you sign up, before you close that window, subscribe to the channel, like it, leave your comments down below so that we know what you liked about the streaming, what other potential articles you want to see, what kind of content you want to see contributed. And until next time, I know that we're going to be doing more streamings. And so for those of you that speak Spanish, you know, or maybe you don't know, that we have another streaming show today at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is called Def Borrachos TV. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, we're going to be posting the link down below as well to that show. So until next time, Andres. Thank you.
See you later, Claudio. Thank you, and thank you everyone in the chat, especially Miguel and Samuel that stay until the end. As Miguel said, I've sent the world a challenge because it's an amazing summer Microsoft product, and we saw it here. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Bye. And the end.